So that's why I choose Frederick Douglass. I choose Marcus Garvey for the same thing. He was the greatest black leader of the 20th century, the 1900s. I mean, he gave us the largest black organization of all time. He's the only leader we've had since slavery who was actually an international leader. None of our other leaders were international. None of them were. Garvey was the only international leader that we ever had. He was truly a Pan-Africanist leader, without question. No one else had that. Everybody else's movement was local. All of them were local. Even when you look at the African independence movements, a lot of them were local. Garvey's movement was international. He led on 6 of 7 continents. There's no life on the 7th. You see, and so because of what he did, and he did it without a single white penny, he's the only leader who never took a dollar from another race. He's the only leader who never took a dollar from another race, Marcus Garvey. Everyone else took money from either Arabs or white people. He was the only one who truly embodied self-determination. And he laid down the blueprint for independent African resurrection. And independent Africa free now because of the philosophy of Garvey. All the African independence leaders, Amilcar Cabral, Thomas Sankara, you name it, Steve Biko, Patrice Lumumba, my own personal favorite, Sekou Touré, Kwame Nkrumah, all of them were Garveyites. All of them, without question. You know, he laid down that blueprint for the freedom of Africa. No one else can say that. He's the only black man who sought to build an international economic distribution for our people. A black bank for our people on an international level. We had other organizations who had them, but on an international level. No one was as visionary as a Marcus Garvey. No one was as successful as a Marcus Garvey. No one was as sincere as a Marcus Garvey. So if I'm looking for 2 men that I would like our young men to emulate, to study, to understand, to master, it would have to be the 2 greats from the 19th century to 20th century, Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey. And I don't think it's no coincidence that Marcus Garvey named his first Black Star Line steamship the SS Frederick Douglass.
Is that right?
Yes, first Black Star Liner was SS Frederick Douglass. So even though they differed ideologically, some people say that. It says you're naming your school after 2 men with 2 competing ideologies. Aggressive integrationism of a Frederick Douglass and the Pan-African nationalism of Marcus Garvey. How do you reconcile them? I'm not trying to. I want them to see.
Right, we learn from everybody.
I want them to see the spectrum.
Yes, sir.
Garvey and Douglass represent a continuum.
That's right.
Everybody ain't gonna be a Pan-Africanist. Everybody ain't gonna be an integrationist. But we have to be able to respect the best of both continuums, of both extremes. And I think they are so symbolic of all the thought. Within them 2 men, you get almost every opinion as it relates to the solutions of black folks. I want them to study the integrationism of a Douglass, study the Pan-Africanism of a Garvey, compare and contrast. Who was right, who was wrong. It's okay to critique them. They're not gods and deities. They're men. You know, so I'll be able to do so much with them because they come from 2 different camps. You see, if I had my school named after 2 Pan-Africanists, a lot of parents would be too scared to send their kids. They're like, damn, RBG, you know what I mean? But I give them that Douglass, they say, all right, well, even white folks accept him, or that part of him that they like to publicize. Like with Dr. King, they'll give you that part of King they want. But there's a whole other side of King, like that side of King that got King killed. They don't give you that. You know, same thing with Malcolm. They'll give you Malcolm the last year of his life, you know, after he broke with the nation as it related to, you know, Islam being for all people, that kind of thing. But they don't give you the hardcore Malcolm. I'm going to give our children the total Douglass and the total Garvey. And if you really know Douglass, I could give you a Frederick Douglass speech, and you would think it was Marcus Garvey talking.
But that's kind of interesting.
They had more in common than they had in contrast, even though they represented 2 different ideological camps. And I can explain why. It's because Frederick Douglass, I believe, was influenced by many of the grandfathers of Pan-Africanism, all of which were his contemporaries. See, Garvey's philosophy comes from Edward Wilmot Blythe, a contemporary of Frederick Douglass. It comes from Alexander Crummell, a contemporary of Frederick Douglass. It comes from Henry Highland Garnett, a contemporary of Frederick Douglass. It comes from John Brown Rushworm, who would have been like an elder to Frederick Douglass, but Frederick Douglass was actually in the minority. Of the 6 key leaders of his time, he was the only integrationist. who himself considered Pan-Africanism. He wanted all Africans to move to Haiti. Douglass said that, yeah. Even he, when you study early Douglass, had that Pan-African piece. And I believe that Douglass and King, on a certain level, because of their pragmatism, they engaged. Oh, Elder. Hold on, y'all.